Hi everybody. Starting with a new page, I've taped off the coil, as you know I do. There is smudging that came through from the prior project, but that's okay. You know by now that this is just mark making. So let's put a new protective layer here and get started with the pencil crayons. It's all going to blend in, it's all good. I wanted to remind you that you do not need to be an artist for this. This isn't us creating paintings that'll be scrutinized and analyzed. This is just in our soul journal, and it's just to get into the moment. It's to me, it's better than meditating, especially if you're in need of meditating, but you're not able to, you can't control your mind. This is phenomenal because it really, really, really does get you into the moment if you have trouble calming your mind. So I hope you give it a try. You're going to get better and better and better at it. Now that I've scribbled all over the page, as you know I do for my first mark making, now I'm putting a layer of matte medium. This is to protect the paper. This isn't to protect the coloring because those are pencil crayons that if they smudge a bit, it's rare. They're permanent pencil crayons just for mark making. But by putting down this layer of matte medium, it gives the paper protection. It gives a smoother coat for paint to go over top and be wiped off without scraping and damaging the paper fibers. I'm giving that a good blow dry, and as usual, I speed up the blow drying video for you so that you don't get bored. I've decided I want to get out bigger crayon marks. So these are not permanent. These are water soluble. I love Stabilo Woodies. I take them everywhere. I take them on trips traveling. It's wonderful because you color on them. They've got a lot of intense color in them. You can smudge them around and leave them like that, like a pencil crayon look, or you could add with a wet paintbrush and smear and spread and activate that paint and use it as paint. So I'm going to activate it with spray water. And this time, to give a different background marking, I'm smudging it with my finger while it's wet. So it's just giving, I'm trying to show you with each of these lessons, each time we do a journal entry, I want to show you different techniques so that these skills get layered and layered, and eventually you become the artist that you will become. And you'll have an amazing soul art journal book to look back on, and you'll be very proud of yourself. Trust me, you will. So I'm just adding more marks because these are more intense. But they are water soluble. As you can see, they're very reactive to water. I'm dabbing a little bit where it made it muddy. That's the problem you have, is when you mix bright colors together, when they're wet, they become muddy. And I'd like to keep this soul journal happy and bright. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a blow dry. And now that it's dried, because those markers are water soluble, I'm putting a fixative on there. And that way, when I put the next layer of matte medium over it, painting that medium over top will not spread it. It might spread it a little bit, but not too much. So now that that's been sprayed on, you could either walk away and let it dry on its own. I'm blow drying it to speed things up. Sometimes I like making a very busy mark making background like this. And again, who knows what'll show up. Here's my favorite transparent red iron oxide. Love it. This isn't high flow acrylic, it's just a fluid acrylic. So it's going on a little thicker than paints that I've previously used. So I'm going to help it along with a brush. You're going to be shocked at this layer and wonder, what on earth am I thinking? What am I doing? But I already know that I'm going to use a lot of printed tissue over this with white and transparent patterns. So the stronger the background color, the better that pops when I put those layers over top. So trust me on this, we'll get there. It's going to look like a real mess for a while, but you'll see why. I'm sticking with two colors here, my red iron oxide and my favorite transparent blue. Now, because that's thicker, it's taking a little longer to dry. And notice there's a lot of areas there where the paint's very thick I'm helping move it around a little bit more, but I want to keep the integrity of some of those darker splotches because that just gives more layers of depth for what's going to show up later. So I like to have brighter areas and darker areas and mid-tones. Now that that's quite dry, I'll bring out my transparent blue, which I previously mixed in a little used prescription bottle, actually. I mixed it with white fluid medium, white. So this is transparent blue and white. There's the original, and there's the fluid white. That white is a high flow, so it keeps this very creamy. So I'm going to, with a new brush, paint in all these other areas with blue. This blue is such a beautiful complement to that red orange. If you had a color wheel, you would see, if you pick a color on there, it'll show you the opposite, which is supposed to be the complement. These are just so beautiful. The blue makes the orange pop, and the orange makes the blue pop. These colors just work. Again, this looks like a big mess. What on earth am I thinking? These are big blobs. But trust me, we want this deep, deep background, and we want it modeled and mixed up. And later on, when I put the tissue over with a pattern, I'm not going to know what parts of this background are picked up or what aren't. It's a surprise later on. So I've given it a good dry. I've got in a separate bottle that same blue, but it's more watered down with, it's an airbrush medium, so it keeps it very liquid. So I want pattern. I want to keep with the two color patterns, schemes here, but I want to throw down different patterns. Again, I have no idea. I'm not controlling this. I have no idea how much of this will get picked up in the tissue pattern, but we will see what's revealed later on. This is the same. This is not the red iron oxide. This is the Nicolazo gold mixed with fluid matte, fluid medium. So it's giving a complementary color to it, but there's more yellow in that one. So I am not blow drying that because at first I just walked away and left it for a couple hours, and now I'm only blowing dry what didn't dry completely. Unfortunately, that last splatter of that gold, a lot of that took a while to dry. So this is what I'm thinking. I knew in advance, and usually I don't, but I knew in advance that I wanted to do something like this. So I'm just taking different tissue papers that I printed, and I will send a link to that video. That's a lot of fun. But you can see how putting these over now, you know why I needed the bright, bold background, because it wouldn't pick up otherwise. So that's what I've decided on, is that last one. I'm trying to decide, do I even want more bold hits of color underneath? So I've got some previously printed tissues from some stamps that I made myself, some masks that I made, and I'm just putting it down to see if that gets picked up through here. But I'm realizing it didn't make a bit of difference. So I'm not going to waste those right now. I'll use part of that later. But right now, the background I've got, you can see, works. So all of a sudden, that tissue printed yarn, it's just going to look like this multicolored yarn that we've put down on the page. Again, a healthy dose of matte medium. Always put that divider on page protector underneath. So I'm putting my matte medium. By the time we finish all this paper is going to be so protected and stiff. So you can see where it's spreading a little bit brighter yellow, where those dots of the last gold were added, and it's still a little wet. Let's put this down. This is where the fun, this is magic number one, people. You know by now. I'm purposely ripping off some of the corner because I want that area revealed. I do that often. I don't want the tissue print to be monopolizing the entire page. In this case, it's almost the entire page. which I don't usually do. But I just thought we had fun printing the yarn on the jelly plate, and now you can see why I did that. All the transparent area is now picking up the multicolors underneath. I'm using my paint spreader because it's like a spatula, or you could use an old wallet card, anything that'll scrape that along. So you can see where the wet gold, I'm wiping that away because I didn't want that color. I want to keep the integrity of that white from the tissue paper. I want to keep it bright and white. And even as I'm spreading this matte medium around, it picked up still some of that. So I'm trying to dab away anything where the yellow got spread. Isn't that fun? Look at that. I'd love to buy a yarn that looked like that and crochet something, because that'd be just a riot. So this is, as you can see by now, this is going to be one of my happier pages. It's going to be quite active because of the movement of that yarn. I've decided that that tissue print that I had earlier, I liked it, and I want to make that part of my image. Who knows that? I mean, you could think that that's a funky plant, whatever. And it kind of reminds me of a baobab tree or something like that. So I'm using it. Again, I'm not positive where this painting is going yet. I've decided I'll use some of this blue as well because it is the same blue. I love ovals, as you know, ovals and circles, so when I can find them, I like them. They go with the flow of the rope on the page, the yarn on the page, because they're fluid and they've got a lot of action just like the rest. The risk I have here is making the page too busy, but again, this is just one of the layers. We can see where this is headed. I purposely was in a funky mood this time, so that's why this is much more funky of a journal page, and that's okay. This is one of those pages where I might look at it later on or years to come and say, yeah, that was a happy day. I remember that. I don't have to journal that I was happy. I'll know by looking at the painting. I decided that I didn't want the trunk of that tree, if you will, to show up red like that. So I'm using a lot of the printed blue, the tissue paper that's already got blue paint on it. I'm using that as if I'm painting blue over that spot. I don't waste anything. So clearly you can see I'm doing most of the activity of this painting on the bottom third. I'm purposely leaving the top 2/3 with more white. I want the yarn to travel through all that white, so it's great to keep a lot of white up there. And also I'm thinking that down the road I might look at this when it's really, really good and dry. Oh, I'm tearing away while it's wet, some of that excess tissue. You can do that if you pull away from the page, not towards it. I'm trying to keep a lot of white in the top half of the painting because maybe someday down the road I'll glue over top a quote, or I'll get a funky pen and write funky quotes somewhere in that white area. So even when we finish this today, it's by no means finished. This soul journal, I've made another one before, and I did these starter pages, and then later on I went in and wrote quotes that applied to my mood that day. I decided I found a little bit of a wavy line on white, on some white tissue, so I'm adding that. Again, I wanted to soften the bottom third of that page because it was getting too busy. And I don't have the page protector under there, but there's a lot of tissue going over the edge of the page right there, so I don't mind that the glue stayed on there. Every time I decide something's too busy, in today's lesson anyway, you can always take tissue paper and go over top and mask it. I found a little bit of a white stripe. I'm keeping the straight edge of that page on the straight edge of the paper. Anyway, I'm throwing a new element in there, and I quite like it. I didn't want to do bold stripes because that would compete with the yarn width. I'm looking at some more printed previously because it's the same blue, and I'm just laying it over to decide. Again, the magic of using tissue paper is that You place it over top. If you don't think it gives you what you want, you don't use it. In this case, I'm looking and I'm thinking, no, even though this is my journal page, I'm looking at it critically as if I was a viewer in a gallery, and would I like that on there? And I decided, no, it's not adding to the story of this page. It's confusing. Even though it's got a whimsical movement like the yarn, it didn't work for me. I'm painting on another layer because I'm at that time thinking, quite often what I would do is maybe put some fluid paint over that and smudge it around and color some of that white. Right now I'm just doing it because I know I'm going to be doing something and I'm going to need this layer. Before I dry that completely, I decided I didn't like all that white tissue up against the tape of the coil, and I was worried that it would be hard to get off later. So while the tissue's still damp, I'm going to use that paint spreader as an edge, and I'm going to take off some of that excess so that when I remove the tape later, it'll come off cleanly. The paint spreader is pretty handy. So I'll finish drying. So I did have a little bit of that yellow smear and spread around. You can see it even from here. So I'm going in and I want to bring back the bright white integrity there. So I'm just covering over. And I'm even using the brush to go wobbly along the yarn edge because I wanted to keep that bubbly, uneven chenille yarn look. If I was to take that and perfectly move the paintbrush, see, I'm wobbling just like the yarn. But it's just already cleaning up the page. I quite like how the yarn is soft and fuzzy looking, but I've got this bright, bright white to bounce against it. And now you know by now, if you've watched my videos, that I like to enhance ovals when I find them. So I'm going in the middle of some of these ovals and making the white stronger so that those oval shapes pop. There's something about the shape of ovals and circles and the continuity that they provide. And I use my finger if I've gone over any of that wonderful colored yarn area that's exposed through the tissue paper. I don't want to cover any of that. So if I've got white on there, I use my finger to smudge it off, and that way the finger smudge keeps it irregular as well. We don't want perfection here. So I'm really liking how this is cleaning up already. And again, I know that, someday down the road, I might, in a very fine, small, pen, a gel pen that would go over top mixed media, I might write just a line or two of a favorite quote in some of these spots. I won't do it today. I want to leave that up to you. There was a lot of yellow there, so I want to get rid of that. But I'm just trying to show you possibilities. So this page in the Soul Journal, again, that could alter a year down the road. I might look at that and say, oh, I want to stamp a butterfly in here. Like, you could do whatever you want, whatever you've got with you, whatever stamps you have. In this case, this is a one-of-a-kind. If you were to say that you made this with stamps, it's a one-of-a-kind because we remember we put the rope on the gel pad and printed it, and there's no way you could duplicate this ever again. This was totally intuitive. This page might look quite different for you from what you're used to, but again, I'm an abstract artist, so I always do abstracts, and I like that because I like the viewer to use their own imagination. In this case, this page is really, really playful and whimsical. And again, with all that white area, someday down the road, I can see how I will write little bits of quotes. If you like what I do, please hit the like button and the subscribe. It encourages me to do more and that I'm on the right track. So I thank you for your support. I'm highlighting more of the white on the bottom. Again, I'm trying to get rid of some of the busyness that was down there. You can almost start to see a story happening here, and it could be any story you like. That could be a wave down there. Those could be a splashing movement of the water, whatever it makes you think of. Give that a good blow dry. I'm just thinking as I look at it. I've got my tissues beside me. I like this one a lot. This is what we did with the yarn as well, but this time in a stripe, an irregular stripe. And I quite like two things. I want to put more white at the bottom there, and I want to bring out a new pattern with the tissue. And again, it's hard to know, so I've ripped apart what I think will be quite wonderful. It will mask some of this stuff on the bottom and reveal through the stripes some more of it in a very irregular. Now when I rip away here, I'm staying about the same 1/4 inch width that the yarn was as I tear that away, so that it looks like yarn there as well. Look what that's done to the page. It's already altered it. I haven't even put it down yet, but you could see that's a new effect. You have to be so brave with this technique and just try things. And again, it's just tissue paper. If you don't like it, don't put it down. But I quite like that. Puts a little more weight of white in the bottom. And look what happened with it's like that red tree kind of area has two legs on it. So, you know, I've changed the story already. It's almost like that tree could get up and walk away. And I love how irregular those wobbly stripes are going from the loop-de-loos of the yarn down to the bottom of the page like a drip. I think that's really fun, really, really funky. I want to mask more of that left area. I didn't like what was there. So rather than paint over there, I've got some bits of white tissue. I can put that down instead. And the nice thing about doing this is you could put one layer, and if you think, oh, I need a little bit more, you put another layer of white tissue over it. Again, white goes away when you put the matte medium down, but it clouds it up a bit. And I like the idea that some of that mark making and work down below is being revealed through the tissue. I'm really loving how funky the bottom of that page just became. It's almost like all that, like I say, all that yarn kind of twirled around the page and they kind of dripped. So I've decided I'm going to remove some of that white up there by smudging the blue. And I'm smudging with my hand because I want it to just fade into the white. And that's about the best way to do it. So because there was so much weight and emphasis going to the bottom of the page, doing that on the top allows the eye to travel up to the top of the page, but in a completely different way. Now I'm doing my third magic where I highlight from the revealed areas whatever pattern I want to highlight. In this case, I'm bringing down some blue legs from those oval shapes. And this is just pure intuitive. I didn't plan that when I put the tissue down. It's just what occurred to me. Don't overthink it. And because I do things in threes, I didn't want just two stripes there in blue. I wanted a third. You'll see I quite often will do things in balance with a third somewhere. So now I brought the eye down to the bottom right there in a completely different way. This is, I just think this is almost reminding me of a page out of a children's book where something whimsical happens. And part of my theory in life, since I'm a cancer survivor, is I have to laugh and play every day. So this is what works for me. Doing this kind of stuff got me through my cancer battle, and if you're wondering why a soul journal would be so helpful, it got me through 2 tough years of COVID and cancer. So give it a try. Since that, I've left that reddish shape as a focal point, I may as well highlight it a little bit. Now it's almost too strong, so what I've painted down, I'm going to use tissue paper to dab, and I'm not spreading that around. When I place that tissue down, I'm just putting it straight down and straight up. And it reveals, it takes away a little bit of the boldness of that color. I decided on the stem there I'd like a little bit more. So I've brought the focal point over to that reddish shape, but you can name that shape whatever you want it to be. Okay, take the tape away, always again pulling away from the painting. There are so many layers of matte medium and paint on there that's a little bit thick, but again, this is just a journal book. I've cut away the edges of the tissue. So it gives you a better idea of what we're looking at now. I decided that I want the image to get more misty looking at the top. Even though I've done that a little bit with the blue, I want to soften some of that blue. What I'm trying to do is highlight the busyness of the bottom, but have it disappear into a mist at the top of the page. So in that, even though I'm masking the top of the page, it will help draw the eye up there. And I like the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double this tissue, because the more you overlap the tissue, the whiter it will become. But I'm going to overlap it unevenly so that the bottom has a little bit of mask, and then where it folds, you can see that where the second layer is, it's further up the page. I turned that because it wasn't fitting the whole page. So I could, this is just showing you another technique. I could very easily get matte media in there and add a little white and paint on the misty. But this is just another way of showing you how you can do it by just using your white tissue. I try to give a couple of options to give an effect. So again, I'm going to upside down do the behind layer, which will be further up the page, the top third of the page. And I'll make sure that that gets painted down flat. And when I overlap, then that edge of the page goes further beyond so that you don't have a hard ridge. I didn't want, so anyway, you can see how it's giving the illusion of mist getting heavier at the top. It's much easier to control the effect using layers of tissue than it is using a creamy paint over that. And I've decided I want even more white at the top. And again, I will not place it at the same line where the first folded area went, because I don't want thick ridges of tissue paper. And again, I wouldn't do this if it was for a gallery, because you would see the edge of that tissue when you look up close. But this is just for a journal book, so it's working. And that didn't work very well. But what I want to do is on this last strip, I wanted to have an uneven edge to the page, but it didn't work. So I'm just putting this down. You can see though, like, that it's getting whiter and whiter as we get to the top of the page. It's just a trick. Ghost-like trick. This is my ghosting. And I've decided I want even more white at the top. The very, very top. More cloud. So it would be really hard to paint that effect. How do you paint fuzzy, fuzzy yarn going into bright yarn unless you do it this way? It would be harder. You could do it, but it would be harder. Now also, because I've muted that top half of the page a lot more, there you see the top corner. Top right, zooming in. Look at that. Look how fun that is. I hope you enjoyed working with me today. I enjoyed it. Have a great day.